Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Akisa Kuriyama. I'm a policy researcher of IGES, Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. So I will be in charge of MC for today's side event. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for all participants to coming to this side event named Carbon Market and Carbon Pricing in Asia. Today, we are pleased to invite distinguished speakers and panelists from 3 countries, China, Republic Korea, and Japan. During the presentation sessions, each speaker introduces carbon markets and carbon pricing in each country. Then we have 35 minutes panel discussions with 3 panelists. So first sessions, I'd like to start the welcome remarks. So now I'd like to invite Dr. Duxun Hung, Chairman of Climate Change Center and former Prime Minister of Republic Korea. So please start your opening remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you very much for coming and taking your time for these very, very important topics, which is very crucial in the process of tackling climate change. Asia certainly is a very, very important region in terms of its total magnitude of greenhouse gas emissions, and whether the successful undertaking in Asia in tackling climate change is a real, very important hallmark of the determinants of determining whether this whole global efforts will be successful or not. Certainly, carbon pricing and carbon markets are important in this process. Why do we need markets? Why do we need the pricing? It's clear that that is one of the most effective and least costly institutions that will contribute to reducing climate change. So well-functioning markets and very optimum and relevant pricing will work to the advantage of our global efforts of tackling climate change. Quite fortunately, Korea, China, and Japan have some backlog of the experiences in dealing with the carbon market and carbon pricing. Of course, I cannot say that the institutions we have are complete enough, but clearly we have some level of experience, and by sharing not only among 3 countries, but with the global community, I think that we can improve our institutions, and at the same time, we can really share with you in the cooperative efforts in tackling climate change. Tackling climate change has a very important characteristic in the sense that we need global efforts, and we need regional cooperative efforts, as well as very well functioning and effective policies, not only at the level of central government, but at the level of local communities. So I think that today's seminar is very relevant, although not the whole, many countries in the world are not adopting these institutions, but it's clear that carbon market and carbon price will be one of the key determinants in determining the success or failure of our tackling the climate change. As if you look at Paris agreements, Article 6 has a tremendous clauses for relating with this carbon pricing and carbon markets. And through today's seminar, I hope that all of you will share the experiences of the 3 countries and also share the views how to well function this carbon market and relevant emergence of carbon pricing, which will be crucial in the future in our efforts to tackle climate change. Thank you very much again for coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the next opening remarks, I'd like to invite Professor Hironori Hamanaka, Chair of the Board of Directors, Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. So please start your opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Honorable Dr. Duk-Soo Han, Chairman of Climate Change Center, Professor Liu Bin, distinguished speakers and participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, or IGES, it is my great pleasure to make some opening remarks for the UNFCCC official side event on carbon market and carbon pricing in Asia, jointly organized by Tsinghua University, the Climate Change Center, and the International Carbon Action Partnership. IGES was established in 1998, and our mission is to conduct practical and innovative policy research for global environment and to reflect the results into political decisions and international processes like UNFCCC COP. In order to achieve net zero emissions in the second half of the century, as the Paris Agreement Article 4 indicates, implementation of carbon pricing, such as emissions trading scheme and the carbon tax, is one of the important measures, as was already mentioned by Dr. Duk-Soo Han. Some countries propose an international carbon market, and which is very much relevant to discussions here in Marrakesh under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And in fact, when we look at actual NDCs, the commitment made by many countries, emission reductions would be very important, of course, but carbon pricing initiatives is proposed as a tool for achieving their emission reductions. So in this sense, the theme of this side event, carbon pricing and the exploring the potential for international linkage of different carbon markets is extremely important. As a matter of fact, the East Asian countries of China, Republic of Korea, and Japan, their combined emissions in terms of CO2 is almost 1/3 of the world. Implementing carbon pricing in these countries is expected to achieve effective emission reductions, as well as mobilizing investments toward decarbonizing economy. If we look at the fact that the GHG emissions have been increasing in most of the Asian countries, actions by East Asian countries could send positive signals for mitigation actions, and lessons could be learned for developing effective carbon pricing scheme in this region in the future. We are sure that today's side event will help you understand the experiences in East Asia and become an opportunity for extending the dialogue to other countries. And most importantly, we truly hope that sharing the experience of carbon pricing will contribute to enhancing mitigation ambitions, which are pretty much in line with the ratcheting up mechanism under the Paris Agreement, where each party shall prepare and communicate its successive nationally determined contributions every 5 years with progression. With that, I would like to conclude my opening speech. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Hamanaka. So for the next opening remarks, I would like to invite Professor Liu Bin, Deputy Director of Institute of Energy, Environment, and Economy of Tsinghua University.
Good morning, everyone. It's a very pleasure to come here to join us. Distinguished Dr. Da Songhan, distinguished Professor Hamanaka, distinguished everybody. It's my honor to come here on behalf of Tsinghua University to be co-host the said event today with IGES and with CCC. Our institute of 3E Institute means in the Institute of Energy, Environment, and Economy in Tsinghua University. And our institute is a university-wide initiative for analysis of energy and climate mitigation strategies and policies from an integrated perspective of energy, environment, and economy. With the support of national key energy and climate-related research programs organized by many government agencies as Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, National Development and Reform Commission, National Energy Administration of China. And our institute has become a key national center for low carbon energy knowledge creation and an important think tank with global influence on energy and climate change mitigation issues. 3E Institute also have cooperation with IGES for recent about 10 years. And we have done some researches and projects related to carbon market mechanism comparison between China and Japan. Quantitative analysis of carbon market mechanism impacts, also local official training project on low carbon development. We also development cooperation with the CCC in Korea to explore the renewable energy development impacts on each country. We learn more experience from this cooperation and hope we could find more opportunity to work together. Our institute is now participating PMR project in China for ETS design. China and Korea have many practiced in carbon market mechanism designed, and we need more experience sharing among our three partners in the field. I hope that this opens the door to future cooperation in the future, which this is a successful set event in Marrakesh today. Thank you, everybody, join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Liu Bin. So now we move to the next session, presentation session, to introduce current status of carbon markets and carbon pricing in each country. Actually, in original agenda, the first presentation is made by ICAP and by Dr. Constance Han, but due to her unavailability, so we need to skip her presentation. Then we like to invite firstly Dr. Zhou Jian, Associate Professor, Institute of Energy, Environment, and Economy at Tsinghua University. The title is the current status of China national ETS development. So please start your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zhou Jiankang from Tsinghua University. It is great honor to make the presentation and the topic of the current state of the China national ETS development in the Marrakesh today. In 2011, China launched the carbon emission trading period based on the bottom-up through the track and the area method. And period carbon market covered the Beijing, Tianjin, Shanghai, Hubei, Chongqing, and Guangdong, and Shenzhen. The period regions have different industry structure and economic development level, which produce 30% of China GDP and release more than 20% of the country's CO2 emissions. By the end of last year, by the end of the 2015, the 7 period carbon market issued the total allowance via the 2 billion tons. According recorded the trading volume and the trading turnovers 52 billion tons and 1.5 billion yuan renminbi respectively. We can see there are the regional difference of carbon price in the period carbon market. There are so many factors will affect carbon pricing, such as the weather conditions, allowance allocations, speculations. To some extent, I think the experience and lessons from period carbon market can explain why there are so many why there exists the regional difference in carbon price. First, legislation is a fundamental guarantee. In some carbon market, there are 2 ways of the legislative process. One is double-lateral legislations, such as Beijing and Shenzhen. They will to make the legislation work in the local People's Congress or in the local government. So decisions by the Standing Committee of the local People's Congress, which can give the strongest punishment to non-compliance emitters. But for the single-tile legislations, there is only to just to in the local government. Second, data quality is a key element. For some period carbon market, as normal, there will be to third-party verification to keep data quality. And for the other carbon market, and there, moreover, there will to keep the first-party verification and experts review based on the third-party verification. Third, allowance allocation is a visible hand of the government. ETS policy can merge with some other policies to get the harmony effects, such as industrial structure adjusting policy, energy structure optimizing, and pollutant treatment policy. Let me see the Beijing case. Beijing period carbon market, it covered the whole industries, electricity, heating, cement, petrochemical, service industry, manufacturing industry, and transportation. For the last 3 years, the control entity unit increased by 730%. The turnover of the transaction increased by 770%, and the price remained stable. So, how about the environmental effects by Beijing ETS? First, we can get our finding from our study by CGE models. Compared with the BAU scenario, CO2 emission from 2013 to 2015 were reduced by 3.8% to 4.8%. In 2020, CO2 emission will be reduced by 3.7%. In the other way, we can get our findings from the empirical data. The total CO2 emission of the first batch emitters in 2013 reduced by 4.5% than that in the historical reference year. How to design the national ETS in China? I think first there are two national targets should be considered. One is from the China NDC. The CO2 intensity of GDP decreased by 60 to 75% in 2030 compared with 2005. To achieve the peaking of CO2 emission around 2030. The second is come from the 17th five-year work plan for controlling GHG emissions. By 2020, carbon dioxide emission per GDP fell by 18% compared to 2015. The total amount of carbon emission have been effectively controlled. So there we have the three factors need to consider in the national ETS design. First, contribution to realize the carbon reduction goal from the national ETS in the 17th five-year planning, we are about 50%. Second, carbon dioxide emission per GDP in ETS should above the national target. That means about 18%. National ETS will cover 50% of CO2 emission. That's the overall structure of the national carbon market in China. And the top level is the legislations. In 2014, NDRC published interim measures and the management of carbon emission trading. Now, the national carbon emission trading management regulations is under legislative process by the State Council. And the left side is the measurement and management, which covers the key points of the ETS. And the right side, there's the standard and guidelines. And the bottom level, there's three platforms of national platforms, and its relations with the local platforms. In the future, China will be keep the two-tier management system of the emission allowance. For the central government, there will be to the three parties determine the threshold, determine the total emission allowance of the control and the province, autonomous regions, and the municipalities direct and the central government. Determine the uniform allocation methodology and the criteria. For the local government, they have some freedom, some free choice for the local government. They can make under the central government guidance. Local government can should determine the list of key elements, expand the industrial coverage of ETS, increase the key emitters. And formulate the free allocation quotas with their respective administrative regions. This is our methodology of national allocations. In the first time for China, there is the free allocations, and regarding the allocation methodology, there be mainly consider the two ways: benchmarking and historical carbon intensity reduction. According to the characteristics of different industries. In the final, China carbon market construction is still underway, so there's some problems need to be solved. First, there is the urgent to enhance the progress of verification of CO2 reports. That means it should to improve the ability of the emitters to participate in the carbon price calculations of guidelines of MRV by emitters and the verification board. How to improve the data quality management by local DRC. Second, how to balance the relation among the different stakeholders. One is should to consider how to balance the scientific quality of the methodology and the availability and the verifiability of the data. And also they should to consider the fairness among the different industries, as well as the titles of the quota program and the release of the emitters. In the final, that is the linkage issues. That means in the 17th five-year planning, one way next year should to kick off the national ETS, and at the same time should to consider how to the linkage national carbon market with the pure carbon market. So that's all. Thanks for attention.
Thank you very much for your presentations. So for the next presenter, I would like to invite Mr. Georgin Kim, a member of Policy Community of Climate Change Centers, or Solution for our Climate Management Director. So please start your presentations.
Yeah, could you put that on the slide? Good afternoon. Thank you. Before beginning my talk, I would like to first thank the Climate Change Center for inviting me to this important and prestigious event. As introduced, I am a policy committee member of the Climate Change Center, and I am also heading a small nonprofit in Korea named Solutions for Our Climate. Today, I would like to talk about two topics. Number one, the history of South Korea's climate target, how Korea's power sector has affected our climate target, and what is left to be done. As a second and related matter, I would like to talk about the K-ETS. As you may know, the K-ETS is the second largest ETS in the world, national ETS in the world, following the EU ETS. And we have our experiences now at 23 months, and we are seeing some issues and we are seeing some improvements. In summary, I would say carbon pricing is working well in Korea, and I think that the thing about Korea is that we don't have pricing on air pollutants. I believe there are a lot of discussions here at COP22 about how air pollutant emissions can address climate policy. I believe carbon pricing, we have it, and I think we have a lot of low-lying fruits when we talk about air pollution. So here are my slides. For those of you who have been following where Korea has been standing in terms of climate policy, may recall that Korea announced that it would be subject to a 2030, 30% minus BAU target by 2020, which represents eventually 543 million tons by 2020. Unfortunately, this target has been repealed this year officially. My next slide will explain why that has happened. This dot here represents our NDC. It's a 536 million ton target, which is a 37% reduction from the 2030 BAU. It's slightly lower, as you may notice. Our 2020 target was 543 million tons, slightly lower, only 7 million tons lower than our previous 2020 target. And another interesting thing about this is that among the 37% reductions we are expecting here, 11.3%, about 100 million tons, is coming from international offsets. And which means that our domestic emissions should be around here. And this also means that Korea seemed to be planning to go down to here and then go up back here, which is weird. That is weird, and actually our emission trajectory would likely be something like this. This hasn't been determined yet. We call that, the government would call that the 2030 roadmap, which hasn't been established yet. But why this is happening is basically because of these coal power additions that will be happening between 2016 and 2022. These coal power additions represent an increase of 66% of our coal capacity. Our coal capacity is currently 27 gigawatts. It will increase to 45 gigawatts with the addition of all these coal power plants. As I said, this is to be decided. And the international offsets, how these will be acquired, hasn't been determined yet. My next slide explains that. However, I am more optimistic about our future climate target because Korea is now experiencing its own version of the London fog or LA smog. 30% of our air pollution comes from China, but the 70% is domestically originating emissions, air pollutant emissions. And because of that, the government is under severe pressure to implement immediate measures on coal power plant emissions. This year, some very important progress happened. Early retirement of 30-plus-year-old power plants have happened, and enhancement of air emission limits of relatively new power plants have happened as well. I'm quite sure that the effects of these emission reductions associated to these results haven't been reflected into our NDC yet. So I believe there are a lot more low-lying fruits in terms of air pollution emissions. So I believe Korea will be able to achieve a little bit more than its NDC currently announced due to a lot of air pollution measures to be coming forward. So this leads to my second topic for today. My second topic is about the K-ETS. As many of you may know, the Korea's ETS covers 67% of Korea's total emissions, about 540 million tons. As I said, it's the second largest ETS, national ETS in the world. And it covers about 520 entities. Phase 1, everything was free. Phase 2, a little bit less free. And then phase 3, 90% free, a little bit lower, less than 90% free. The important features and what's been happening in the market are explained in this slide here. Two important features are up on top. First thing, in Korea, in the K-ETS, only the parties that are regulated, only the parties that are subject to a cap are eligible to trade, plus 3 government-owned banks. We don't have the market makers, third-party market makers, banks, financial institutions, brokers that you would see in a mature commodity market in Korea. Another thing is that credits can be banked forever, basically. They have no expiry. So what is happening? And another thing, it's not in the slide, but I should have to explain is that this is Korea's practically first energy commodity market, energy/environment commodity market. Korea's power market has been regulated since its beginning, owned by almost 100% by government-owned companies. And this is kind of like the first kind of market-based mechanism you're seeing in the energy sector. So do the two of these combined, what's happening is companies are banking their credits. I mean, they don't know what's going to happen. They haven't experienced this. They're banking the credits. So the surplus credits are not coming out into the market, despite the market being long eventually, which is raising the prices. Another important feature I should explain about the K-ETS is that targeting is sectoral based, which means that depending on which sector you're in, you could be subject to a different emission reduction factor. So you could be in the lucky sector, or be an unlucky sector. And the unlucky sector people have been raising the litigations that I've mentioned here, 40 allocation lawsuits among 520 companies, which is quite a lot. So this will have to be changed in the future, I believe. Offsets, yes, we do allow offsets. CDM is the main offset flow. Domestic CDM only until now, except for adipic acid and HFC projects. The important thing is that Korean government, because of the surge of prices, is slowly considering to introduce adipic acid offsets into the scheme. Nothing has been decided, but there are discussions about that currently. These are the figures of the market, as I discussed. Excluding offsets, the market was minus 3 million tons, 3 million tons short. And the petrochemical sector, semiconductor sector, non-ferrous metal sectors were the ones with the stringent emission reduction factors. So most of the litigations came from these sectors here. And another thing I should add here, and on top of this minus 3 million ton short market, about 9 to 10 million tons of offsets were injected. So eventually the market was about 6 million ton long. And despite the market being long, the prices have been going up steadily. As I said, I think that is mostly attributable to market structure issues. The price went slightly down here in June, and this was basically because of market stability measures, which was basically a release of about 1 million credits in June last year, just before the settlement period. Trade volume and frequency has been not as frequent as expected. I would say this is also because of the fact that there are no third-party market makers in the market. So what can we learn from 23 months of the K-ETS? I would say first, Korean industry is getting very used to a carbon price. They expect to pay plus minus 10 tons. I mean, $10. I mean, I'd say this would vary depending on which company you're in for carbon. And companies are now realizing that saving emissions saves money. So that's a very good thing happening in Korea. However, as I said, market was not functioning properly, mostly attributable to unlimited banking, prohibiting third-party market makers, and it's the fact that it's the first energy commodity market in Korea. Another thing that I would say is an issue is that the government, because of the increase in prices, have had a tendency to continuously intervene in the market. They've implemented market stability measures. They've removed cap on accepting early action credits. And there will be some additional allocations for phase one. Because our trajectory, emission trajectory has to go up, that delta will have to be allocated as additional allocations and increasing borrowing limits. So these measures added up has given kind of like an atmosphere in the market that let's wait. I mean, why invest in low carbon projects? Let's wait and let's see how the government controls the credit prices. So this is it for me today. Thank you. As I said, thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. Please let me know if you have any questions. My emails are up there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for Mr. Jojin Kim. So the next presenter is Dr. Yuji Mizuno, a principal researcher of Climate and Energy Area, IGES. Please start your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Fukuyama-san, for introducing. My name is Yuji Mizuno from the IGES. I'm also be very much delighted to speak something on the carbon pricing together with our distinguished colleagues from the China and the Korea. After having heard that the two very interesting and fruitful and intensive presentation, my presentation will be rather general, since the Japan have not introduced ETS yet, and at this point of time, Japan does not have any exact plan to introduce the ETS. Nevertheless, I want to introduce the current situation of the carbon pricing in Japan. So early this year, there's a report was published from the Long-Term Climate Change Strategy Advisory Group. I would caveatly say that this is the kind of informal advisory group to the Minister of the Environment. So this advisory group consists of very eminent persons, and they released the report. The report doesn't include not only carbon pricing, but very broad policy measures for toward the long-term climate policy, but that does include carbon pricing. It clearly says carbon pricing is effective. And at the same time, they proposed that they combine with the social security reform and corporate tax reform. So the comprehensive tax reform, including carbon tax, will be very important. And also they touched upon the kind of the coordination among the maybe neighboring countries. So if the common carbon pricing introduced to across the neighboring countries, the share of the damage to the kind of the international competitiveness will be minimized. So this report is very positive to introduce carbon pricing, but again, I have to say this was the informal input. But early the May this year, the government of Japan has released its official the plan for the global warming countermeasures, or maybe in short, the climate plan. This, as I said, is official, and the cabinet has decided. So in this report, they touched upon the carbon tax and the emission trading scheme. Whereas the carbon tax, actually, the Japan has introduced carbon tax already from the 2012. So from my point of view, the climate policy plan doesn't, how can I say, that doesn't plan to broaden or deepen to change the carbon tax introduced so far. So I will introduce later, but now the government of Japan has collecting the money from the carbon tax and used for the climate change measures. And this plan, this climate policy plan, does say exactly the same that the government of Japan is doing. But I may say at least there are some how can I say, the objection to continue the carbon tax as usual. But at least the government of Japan has decided not to abolish carbon tax, to continue this level. Whereas the domestic emission trading scheme, again, in the course of the discussing the climate policy plan with the various kinds of stakeholders, there, as far as I know, that there are strong objection to introduce the emission trading scheme. So maybe this climate policy plan reflects such kind of voices, and it says that the government will at least explore the emission trading scheme carefully, taking into account the various elements. But I want to emphasize, again, this is the official plan decided by cabinet this year. But this climate policy plan does explicitly say says every 2 years they will review. So if we find some shortage, then we have to introduce some additional policy measures, which of course include carbon tax emission trading scheme, of course, as appropriate, and it depends on the consensus among the various stakeholders, various ministries. That is I think, the current status of the carbon pricing, carbon market in Japan. So our carbon tax rate is the more or less 300 Japanese yen, is the, I may say, just less than the $3 per ton. So I have had this in the side, another side, I mean, that the level of the $5 ton, less than $5 ton carbon tax is not effective. It may be true that this price level may not incentivize a lot to decrease the emission trading. But at the same time, I've heard also the stepwise approach is very important. But of course, Japan has deployed the stepwise approach toward the $3 per ton. But they are using this tax revenue exclusively for the climate change policy measures. So at least this carbon tax will continue, and that tax revenue will be utilized to the climate mitigation measures. The third one is the JCM, which is the Joint Crediting Mechanism. Again, this official climate change plan does stipulate about the JCM. So the government will implement the JCM, and they expect between the 50 to 100 million ton over the 2030 that the JCM could contribute to emission reductions all over the world. If I just introduce what the joint crediting mechanism is, it's kind of the international market mechanism implemented bilaterally. So Japan will support, or Japan at least contribute to emission reductions in the partner countries. So by the strict MRV, the credit will be issued, and but different from the CDM, the credit will be shared between a partner country in Japan. So already JCM has issued a very small amount of credit, but I have to say this is for the first time for each host country to issue the credit by themselves. It took several times to establish such kind of procedures like the CDM we had. So now the JCM is very much ready to be fully operationalized in several countries. Then, before I conclude my presentation, I have to go to kind of the past, a little time slip. So in the Kyoto world, I'm afraid, in the Paris Agreement era. So actually, the data comes from our IGES database utilized by the UNFCCC data. So I have to illustrate the relationship between China, Korea, Japan with regard to the credit. So the Japan acquired 144 million ton CDM credit CERS in the first commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. As you can see, Japan has bought a pretty much credit from China, Brazil, India, followed by Republic of Korea. So at least in the Kyoto era, there are some, not link, but Japan has the connection in terms of the credit with, of course, Brazil from China and Korea. If I look oppositely from the host country's point of view, this is the CERS in China which transferred to the Annex 1 countries, where this is the Korea. So from China, I think Japan was the second largest buyers in terms of the CDM credits, whereas in Korea, Japan was the third largest buyer for their CERS. So I have to say that in the past, already there are some kind of exchange between the credits between Japan, China, Korea. But of course, under the Kyoto post-COVID period, Japan was the only sole buyer. But under the Paris Agreement, I do believe, I don't know, in the short run or long run, medium run, that this kind of exchange will be very mutually, not the unilateral, how can I say, the one direction. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for Dr. Yuji Mizuno, and also thank you very much for all the presentators. Now we'd like to move on to next session, a panel discussions. In this session, we would like to disseminate actual practice or lesson learned from implementing carbon pricing or discussions of carbon pricing. So due to other negotiations overlap, some speakers are changes from agenda, but I would like to invite three discussants here. Professor Duan Maushens, Director of National Carbon Market Research Center, Tsinghua University. And the second panelist is Mr. John Jin Kim, member of Policy Committee of Climate Change Center from Republic of Korea. And the last panelist is Dr. Yuji Mizuno from IGES. And also this session is moderated by Professor Hironori Hamanaka, Chair of Board of Directors. So please start this discussion and please moderate this session by Professor Hamanaka.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have about 40 minutes available for this panel discussion. And I would like to moderate discussion mainly around the theme of state of carbon pricing policy development and implementation in each country. And I would like to pose questions to each panelist while navigating discussion. I hope we'll be able to have some time for Q&A with the audience, but due to the limited time available, it may not be the case. So first of all, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, as was already introduced by my colleague, Mr. Kuriyama. First, Mr. Duan Maushens from China. Thank you very much for joining us. And then Mr. Jorin Kim from Korea. Thank you. And also Dr. Yuji Mizuno from Japan. And first round, I would like to ask three panelists mainly the three questions. As already made by our presenters, China will start nationwide emissions trading scheme from 2017. Next year, Republic of Korea has already started implementing emission trading scheme since 2015. Japan has been implementing carbon tax since 2012. Having these in mind, as the first round of this panel discussion, I would like to ask three questions for all the panelists. But some of the questions may not be relevant for your country. So if that would be the case, please state whatever you would like to make comment. First question is, what kind of benefits have been identified through the operation of this operation or discussions on carbon pricing policy, such as emissions trading scheme or carbon tax? And second question is, if the scheme in your country has a revenue generated from carbon pricing schemes, how these revenue are used, for what purposes. And third question is that when government implement carbon pricing schemes, some concerns are raised, such as it will have negative impact of international competitiveness and on innovation or technology innovation, since carbon pricing will take away companies' capital for research and development investment. So how you could respond to such concerns? So these are the three questions that I would like to ask you. So let me first ask comments from Mr. Duan Marshall, please. You have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon. First, I mean, on the benefits of carbon pricing, I think, well, we can view it from various aspects. First, I think it's a very good channel to inform the entities that emissions will no longer be free in the future. I think that's very important, because only through this, they can change their decision process. I mean, they need to consider the cost of emissions in their decision making. I think that's very clear, because you know our pilot scheme first started operation in 2013, and basically now they have, for some of the pilots, they have already operated for 3 years. And early this year, we have conducted a questionnaire survey. It's an anonymous survey, and it covered, we got responses from more than 300 enterprises, basically about 15% of the covered enterprises by our pilot program. And you can see that while the ETS is actually having some impacts on their decision making. So basically, they told us, well, according to the result, basically more than 40% of the companies said that, well, they now started to consider emissions cost in their investment decision making. That's the first one. And more than half of the enterprises have established some dedicated department for emissions control or mitigation. I think that's very, very important impacts. We can say that the impacts that the ETS are having on the Chinese enterprises. I mean, there are also many others. For example, I can just give a very simple example. In the past, people always say, well, we have very the statistical basis in our system in China is very poor, because the data quality is not that good. But while through several years operation of the ETS, we now are very confident while the data quality from those covered entities are much more reliable than what was in the past. I think that is very important, and I mean, with it's only with those good results from the pilot system can China make the decision to start our national system in a very short time. I mean, without the pilot practices, I don't think the Chinese government will make up its mind to start our national system in a very short time. I think that's the first question. The second is on the revenues of the utilization of the revenues from the system. While there are different practices in our pilot, but well, generally they have used the revenues basically mainly from auctioning of allowances. They have used the revenues to establish what we call it, some call low carbon development fund, some call mitigation fund, but whatever, the fund will mainly be used for mitigation purpose. But while in terms of management of funds, there are different practices. I mean, in Guangdong, for example, they have established a private-public partnership for the purpose of operation of the fund. I mean, basically, they are not only using the revenues from the auctioning, they are also trying to attract some funds from the private sector to promote mitigation. So on the third question, I mean, concern, I mean, always there are concerns from the industry. I mean, that's reasonable, and that's also understandable. But I don't think that's people should always be very concerned about the possible negative impacts on the industry. For example, I mean, we have ETS pilot in 7 regions, And in our mainland, we have 31 provinces. If you look at the economic development of all those provinces, you can see, well, the economic development in those ETS pilot regions are much better than those non-ETS pilot regions. I mean, this is very clear. Basically, ETS not only going to have negative impacts on their competitiveness, it also helps them to shift their competitive. I mean, they are going to trying to create some new jobs from the green development sector. I mean, I think that is very important. And also, just my colleague presented the tradings, the prices in the pilot system. You can see that, well, the prices are not that high. I mean, it's several US dollar, and the trading volume is not very high. I mean, I think the reason is quite simple. The local government are concerned about the possible negative impact, so they have been very generous in allowance allocation, but well, which turned out, I mean, the concerns is not necessary. So I mean, that's one of the lessons we have learned when we develop our national system. So basically, in our national system, we will be using a benchmarking approach. For the benchmarking will be the primary allocation approach for our national system. So I mean, that we are not going to allocate allowances based on the historical emissions of the enterprises. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And then may I invite Mr. George Kim?
Yes. I guess the benefit of the K-ETS, 2 years of the K-ETS, is that carbon price is getting into the system, as explained. With the development of this ETS, which is a quite complicated process, what is happening is a lot of manpower is being developed, cultivated. A lot of people are getting used to the term, the concept of carbon, where it comes from, what they should do. They're learning about energy commodity markets, and it is really getting into the corporate decision-making process. So that is a very important, very difficult to calculate phenomenon that is happening in Korea right now. So I believe, and all this development is making it more difficult for the government to reverse the trends. Backtrack in terms of the K-ETS. Which is a very positive development. I've explained a couple of issues up there. I believe most of those issues, our government, the market players are learning what the issues are, and I see that those issues I've talked about up there will be addressed in the near future. With regard to the proceeds from allocations, first of all, we have been free. I mean, phase one has been free allocation, so there are no proceeds yet. But I understand in the national allocation plan, if there are proceeds, I mean, phase two, there will be some proceeds that those proceeds from emission auctioning will be used for supporting companies. I am not sure about the details. I understand that the details haven't been yet discussed in detail until now, but there will be soon a discussion on where that money will be used. And number three, competitiveness, a very important question, I believe. Frankly speaking, what I am hearing from major conglomerates in Korea is not about the competitiveness. It's not about, they are not worried about the price. It's more about the uncertainty caused by all kinds of interventions in the market. And that is causing a lot of discussions with them. Why is this happening? And that is kind of bringing in a lot of questions about the system. I mean, and as I mentioned, that is leading to this decision to just wait for what the government does instead of invest right now with the carbon price. So companies are more frustrated, are more disappointed about the uncertainty that certain signals are providing rather than the industrial competitiveness, I would say. Of course, some companies are in the margin. And for example, the cement sector, construction industry hasn't been good in Korea. And on top of that, you have a big carbon target. It would be disappointing from them, but that I would say is not because of the carbon, about the carbon price. It's just the trend of the industry. Surprisingly, we are not hearing as much as expected about industry competitiveness during the last 2 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Then Dr. Mizuno, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Hamanaka. Okay, with regard to the benefits, I have to say very moderate manner that the Japan's carbon tax is the kind of the moderate level, but it does affect to the pricing effect, as well as the utilizing the revenue for the climate mitigation measures. So it does affect to mitigate. But when we talk about 80% reduction or the carbon neutral goal, obviously that level is not enough. So now we are enjoying a very first little benefit, I may say, but we have not enjoyed full benefit. Benefit in this case, what I mean is the climate mitigation is, I may say, not enough at this point of time. So but at least the introducing the carbon tax in a very moderate level for the beginning, as well as the discussing or exploring the introducing the ETS in Japan, will have some effect that to implement the current policies and measures as much as possible in order to comply our mitigation target in 2020 or 2030. So unless we will, how can I say, we will have some possibility to fail our target, then substantial, we have to start substantial discussion to introduce the real carbon pricing. Real means including the ETS. So in that sense, that this discussion on carbon pricing is, how can I say, indirectly affecting to implement the current policy and measures effectively, I may say. The second, the revenue, as I said, in Japan, the carbon tax revenue are fully utilized for the mitigation measures for the promoting renewable energies, energy efficiency, energy saving, and also the support to the joint crediting mechanism. The tax revenue for carbon tax is again I may say the moderate with regard to the so-called the tax system. So the $2 to $3 billion per year are not enough to how can I say reduce other corporate tax or the VAT or the security and so on. So for the time being, I think the Japan will continue to the current carbon tax structure. Thirdly, the international competitiveness, as my distinguished colleague from China the one mentioned, I also can understand, and that is, how can I say, natural for worry about that. But again, in order to reduce 80% in several decades, it is clear that we have to reduce. And in order to reduce dramatically, I don't want to say this is the burden, but I think we have to pay something that will be beneficial for the long time. Lifetime cost to reduce mitigation is, I think, much cheaper than we do something later or we do something now. So the international competitive issue is I can say kind of I can understand, but given that our neighboring countries are introducing carbon pricing, that the kind of the fair treatment or the equal, how can I say, the condition for the competition, then I may say it is our time to think about introducing some carbon pricing, maybe not now, but in the mid-run. Finally, innovation. From my point of view, I think the constraint will be the mother of the innovation. If people are living our life with the comfort, people may not think to change anything. There is a constraint, of course, everyday life, every time, every year. That's why people want to improve. People want to change something. So from my point of view, the carbon pricing will inhibit some innovation is the kind of the opposite way of thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As you have heard, that the actual situation in 3 countries different with each other, but nevertheless, at least from our Chinese and Korean colleagues, we have heard that they are now feeling benefits of introducing emissions trading scheme. Japan has been implementing carbon tax for the past 4 or 5 years. And as Dr. Mizuno mentioned, that they are feeling some benefits, but may not be feeling full benefits of a carbon pricing scheme because nationwide, Japan hasn't yet been able to introduce emissions trading scheme. Revenues and its use, it depends on the difference. Depends on the actual situation in 3 countries, but at least now the China and Japan, there are some revenues from auctioning allowances or through carbon tax, and they are funding using these revenues for mitigation purposes or some related matters. And with regard to concerns for introducing carbon pricing schemes, there are different views expressed depending on the different state of development and implementation of carbon pricing schemes. Now, let me move on to my second round discussions. And my question is as follows. Even though each East Asian country has just started to implement or discussing the introduction of carbon pricing scheme, the audience here in COP22 are really interested to hear on the future prospect of linking carbon markets. So from this point of view, I would like to ask 3 panelists to share your perspectives for linking ETS in the Asian region. So once again, let me begin this round of discussion from asking Mr. Dion Marshall.
Yes, well, linking is a very important issue. I mean, it's important not only in terms of the possible linkage between Eastern or Asian countries, but also it has been a very important issue for the decision making of developing our national system, because in our national system will cover 31 provinces in our mainland. So one of the very, very important issue we have been discussing for a long time or debated for a long time in the development process is what kind of roadmap we should follow in that process. Shall we follow a top-down approach or pathway, or shall we follow a bottom-up pathway? I mean, many people say, well, now you have already have a 7 pilot system. Well, then you can expect you can increase the number to 31 or 32. I mean, then you link all those pilot system, you will get a national system. But someone think, well, maybe no, you should start based on the experience of the pilot, but you should use a top-down approach. You should develop the rules for your national system from scratch. I mean, that's 2 different thinking. And in this process, we have conducted some research, and we found that, well, it is very, very difficult to link those different pilots. I mean, if not impossible. I mean, and I mentioned we have 7 pilot systems. At the very beginning, two of the pilot regions, they expressed clearly their intention to link their system at the very beginning, even before they start the design of their system. But later on, when we compare the rules of their systems, you can say, well, the rules of these two systems are very, very different. I mean, even they have the political intention at the very beginning to link their system, but still you find the rules are quite different. I mean, this is actually a lesson we have learned from the pilot. That's why the Chinese government decided to follow a top-down approach to establish our national system. So basically, we will have a unified national system. So we will have rules, unified rules for all the regions. We do not differentiate regions, and I mean, we do not. We will not apply different rules for different regions. We are going to apply the same rules for all the regions, and that's why one of the lessons we have learned from the pilot. I mean, on the possible linking between different countries. I mean, well, as our national system is expected to be operational next year. I mean, there have been a lot of discussions on possible linking of the Chinese system with many other systems, for example, with the European system. While there are discussions about that, but well, generally people agreed that the linking between those major systems should be a long-term vision. It is not a short-term. It is not the short-term priority, at least. Well, basically, I remember that the officials from China, from Europe, from EU agreed. Well, maybe after 2020, that's a priority for after 2030, but definitely not in the short term. The most important issue in the short term, for example, for the Chinese national system, is to let the system, to kick the system started, and to improve the system gradually. But I think I wish to mention one thing. Well, I mean, we saw the difficulties in linking different systems, and I think one of the difficulty lies within the political willingness, but some other even major barriers lie with the technical differences among the design of different system. And well, it tells us, well, if you have the willingness to link your systems, so at the very beginning, when you design your system, you need to consider to make the design of your system very similar to each other. I mean, in CCS, we always call it we call them lock-in effect, right? I mean, or in CCS communities, they have they capture ready, right? You have some design, even you do not wish to, you are not able to implement it at the very beginning. I think it's very similar in the ETS design. If you have the willing to link your system at the very beginning, you should always keep the possibility of linking in your mind. So basically, you should keep the possibility. You keep the linking feasible. I mean, that is one very, very important issue.
Thank you very much. And then may I ask Mr. George Kim?
Yes, I fully agree with Mr. Duan's point. There are practically, I mean, the level of discussions on linkage among Korea and China, for example, there are discussions. There are some papers, there are some MOUs, but I believe that and my colleagues agree too, is that the level of discussions is quite primitive right now, but you don't know what's going to happen in the future. China will have an ETS, something may develop in the future. I am not. So we'll have to see about what happens. Another thing I would like to mention, I mean, since this question has been raised, is that a very unique feature of Korea's NDC is that there is among the 37% target, Korea has committed to 11.3% is planned to come from international offsets. So although not linkage of systems, Korea is looking into and will have to look into opportunities abroad. As you may have seen the slides I've just provided, carbon prices in Korea are very high, are uniquely high, about $15–16 per ton right now, compared to other systems around the world. So the government will definitely look into more economically wise, reasonable opportunities around. I personally see a lot of potential in forestry, and our government will have to really seriously think where we are going to acquire those credits and how that will happen. And that discussion is, I believe, quite imminent in our government right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Then Mizuno-san, please.
Thank you very much. I think I should be creative enough in the future of the linking between the three countries. Again, even if I don't know Japan is introducing the ETS, we will design to reflect our national circumstance. And I assume that in China or Korea as well, they are implementing or they are designing their own ETS, considering their own national circumstance, considering discussing with a lot of variety of stakeholders. So there are a variety of ETS design elements that the cap, allocation, banking, carryover or credit use, auctioning, benchmarking, grandfathering, and so on. I do agree that the kind of very similarity will be needed in order to be linked. But basically, I don't think that each country is implementing or thinking or designing ETS in order to be linked. The basic purpose is to reduce emissions domestically, cost effectively. So if there are some need or if there are some benefits to be linked, they will be linked. But before we must think about the linking, I may say that those two or maybe three or two countries will be thinking, I mean, the coordination in the system design. As I said, maybe some equal footing or some equal treatment to the industries, not only within the country, but also among the countries will be very much appreciated. So the first, I do think that coordination is important, and the linking will be the result of after each country introduce ETS, and if they have some benefits, if they find benefits for the linking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As you have heard, this issue is extremely important. But at the same time, as our panelists shared their views, perspectives, that although, for example, in China, the short-term issues is rather focused on the linking different regional or provincial markets and how to build effective national systems first, and then international linkage issue between different carbon markets in different countries may be a long-term issue. But at the same time, I think it would become very much important policy issues for all the countries internationally to try to establish effective linkage between carbon markets in order for them to be able to implement effectively their nationally determined contributions, including their successives. So I think we have maybe 5 or 6 minutes left. So I would like to open the floor and invite your questions or comments. And if you wish to ask comments or ask questions to panelists or make comments, please identify yourself and to whom, in case you have questions, to whom you are raising questions. Yes, that gentleman. Yes. And next, yes.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I am Abhishek from TERI, the Energy and Resource Institute. It's a research body in India. My question is to Mr. Duan. You mentioned that you have done some study in which, you identify that more than 40% industries are willing to, price carbon. So if you could just, share with us a possible method of doing it by the industry, or if companies are doing it, what are the methods they are following, or is there any case study or best practices of doing this? Thank you.
very much. And then the gentleman, please.
Ask it now, yeah. Okay. Kennedy Graham, New Zealand Centre for Global Studies. On the question of interlinkages and competitiveness, the questions to all, any of the three. I recognize that it's unavoidable to build from the bottom up. So you start, in the case of China, you start with provinces and you get interlinkages, you get to national level, no doubt. If the rest of us being smaller countries and some of us more centralized, it's easier to get a national system going. But my concern, and so my question is this: as long as you don't have interlinkages between countries, you are going to have, you will not have a uniform price, whether it's just East Asia or whether it's Europe, Asia, plus Australasia, or whether it's global. You will not have a common uniform price. If you don't have that, you will always be vulnerable domestically to the problem of competitiveness, international competitiveness complaints, and carbon leakage. We have it in New Zealand, carbon leakage to China, for example, already. And the prospect of not having any kind of interlinkages before 2030 fills me with dread, because you will have, if not confusion, you would at least have a lack of uniformity between countries, and the competitiveness and the carbon leakage issue will always be there. So I just put that to the panel for comment. And I recognize the problems and the difficulties, but I think there is a sense of urgency to it.
Thank you very much. You may have additional questions or comments, but due to time limitations, let me stop at this point. And I would like to ask, first of all, Mr. Duan Marchand to respond to questions from our colleagues. And then if you have any comments with regard to our New Zealand colleagues, would you please make sure? Make sure.
Yeah, thank you. On the first question, it's not a study; it's a survey. So basically, we sent a questionnaire of I think more than 60 questions to the covered entities, and we did some analysis of the outcome. That's the first question. The second, well, I mean, I agree. It's always beneficial to link different systems, and well, it is urgent. But I think we should always be optimistic, because we should say the already happening positive and rapid changes. I mean, I think 5 years ago, who imagined that China will have an ETS, even national ETS? I mean, by 2017, I mean, I think things are moving very quickly. But I think, well, I mean, there are a lot of debate also in China on how we should design our national system. Some people say, well, let's make a perfect design at the very beginning. I mean, I don't think that's the right approach. The right approach should be, well, kick your system started, well, but with no significant flaw, and then improve it gradually. I mean, if you at the very beginning, well, economics always tell you you should use 100% auctioning for allowances. But well, if you really wish to practice that approach, your ETS, your pricing initiative will be killed. I mean, that's a political reality we should always bear in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How about Mr. Jojin Kim?
I fully agree with our colleague from New Zealand, the gentleman from the New Zealand Center for Global Studies. I fully agree with his comments. Yes, unfortunately, the levels of discussions are quite initial now, but things may pick up in the future. I think that Korea, realizing that there are many opportunities abroad, through the 11.3% international offset procurement procedure, realizing that, there are many things abroad, that may be a trigger to discover what kind of opportunities there will be if we expand the market link with China, look into more economically reasonable opportunities there. So 2030, I think probably something would happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mizuno-san.
Thank you. Again, I would like to agree with the one that the uniform price, from my point of view, of course, it may be possible in 2050, but if I think about the uniform price is the maybe global auction. I mean, the 100% auction globally will lead the uniform price, but that is politically, I don't think it's possible in at least the short run. So every country has each circumstance, and that is, I think, at this point of time, the reality in this world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for actively participating in the discussions. And thanks to our three panelists for sharing your views on national experiences, including challenges faced by yourself and possible opportunities that developing different carbon pricing schemes would provide us. And I hope that this side event would be an opportunity for all of you to understand the experiences in East Asia, particularly China, Korea, and Japan. And also this will create further opportunities for extending this kind of dialogue to other countries. And I hope that what is now developing in East Asia and what challenges they are facing and what directions that we need to make progress toward future has become being discussed. And I hope that this forum could be the opportunity that further considering these points towards the future. So with that, I would like to conclude this panel discussion. Once again, let me thank all the panelists for sharing your valuable views and ask you to big hands for our panelists. Thank you very much.